Absolutely, you can find new readers on Kickstarter. And that was the thing that just kind of gobsmacked me with my first campaign.
Welcome to the Wish I'd Known Then podcast. I'm Sarah Rosette.
And I'm Jamie Albright. And this week on the show we have
Anthea Sharp. And we are talking about Kickstarter. And she had some really great ideas. We talked about relaxed prosperity, finding your voice. She had a pruning list. We talked about why it's so important to take things off your list, which is a great thing right this time of year.
Yes. It was good. It was a great interview. I think people will really enjoy it.
Yeah.
So I'm getting over a bit of a cold or just starting a cold or allergies or something. I can barely talk and I'm pretty stuffed up.
So last time we recorded, I wasn't feeling well. And we've not actually seen each other in person, so I didn't give it to you, but I know that feeling.
No, you didn't.
I hope you feel better,
I really
though.
do think my allergies, we were in Dallas, and I think I'm allergic to Dallas, which is terrible because I want to move there.
Because you go there a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh, good.
Well, how was your Thanksgiving? Got any updates for anything besides Thanksgiving?
No, not really. Just, you know what? I did do something. I heard people talking about it on Clubhouse, and I thought, well, why not? I put one of my books, Homecoming King, to free. I think today's the last day that it's free. Anyway, no promo, no nothing. I just stuck it to free. And it got down to 900 in the free store.
Wow, that's great.
With no promo or anything.
Yeah.
So, and I've moved some units, so that's good. So I'll probably do that again. I just, at this point, don't feel like spending a lot of money on things right now during this season is a good idea for me. But if I can get it in front of some people, some new people.
Yeah, that sounds good. Yeah.
I thought I would try, and it was good. But yeah, we were just together for Thanksgiving, our whole family, and my mom and dad and sister, one of my sisters, and we had a great time.
That's fun. Good. Yeah, we had a really quiet when kids came in. All we did was just eat and cook and hang out. It was really nice. It was really nice not to have to travel on Thanksgiving Day, like the day before, or the day after. It was really nice just to be home because usually we are trying to go somewhere, come back from somewhere. So it was great. But last week, it's such a weird week because, it's hard to get started with anything, hard to do anything because everything's just kind of off. But I did that course, that 5 phases of business with Becca Simon. It was excellent. And then I just took the rest of the week and I cleaned out my office. I have big stacks of books that I'm going to get rid of. I'm going to do a mystery giveaway for my newsletter, just like books that I don't need anymore, that I don't want, and some things that I've had, like things that I tried. I ordered samples for the Kickstarter and they turned out to be, not right, or I had extra left over. I'm just going to put those in boxes and give those away this month. So yeah, it's been pretty tame around here, but I do feel better. I feel like
good.
I'm not as junky, which makes it easier for me to think, I guess. So yeah. But that's that is it. Oh, when I got my Christmas decorations up, my tree up.
In fact, I wanted a tree for our dining room because I have one in our bedroom and one, of course, in our living room. And I wanted one for the dining room because there's a big window in our dining room. But I was just going to wait until after Christmas and buy something, until Chris found one on the side of the road. So a pre-lit tree that doesn't light anymore. Fine. We'll just put some lights on it.
Where all the best things are found at the side of the road, right?
I know. I mean, that's kind of where we're at in our life right now, just finding stuff on the side of the road. Like the rest of the homes.
Our neighborhood is amazing because if you put anything out, it just it's gone in like an hour or two. Really. It's just, and our road is kind of busy. I think that's why, because lots of people see things. It's a great place. It's like going to a garage sale without having to spend all Saturday morning driving around.
Or any money. I mean,
that's true.
Yeah. So, Lord giveth and the Lord take away. Actually, I think the saying would be one man's trash is another man's treasure.
Yes. But that would fit. Yeah.
But other than that.
Yeah. Do you still have your tree in your office?
I do. Oh yeah. I have a tree in my office too. Yeah. So I like to decorate. In fact, I said to Alexa the other day, I said, there's something, I don't know, not right about my mantle. It looks kind of plain. And she said, Mom, there are a lot of words you could use to describe your Christmas decorations, and plain is not one of them. And I was like, yeah, you're probably right. So
That's like our mantle. We have 9 or 10 nutcrackers. And it was because we moved and we had some and we moved. And, when movers pack you up, they don't keep things. I could not find the Christmas decorations. I couldn't find my nutcrackers one year after we moved to Houston. And I was like, well, I guess they're just gone. I guess they just didn't make it. So I went out to Hobby Lobby and I bought like 5 or 6 because I love nutcrackers. And the very next year, we found this single box in the attic that we had not opened, and the rest were in there. So now I have like a nutcracker army that I get out every year. So that's what our mantle has, like all the nutcrackers.
Campbell's favorite ornament on our tree is a nutcracker. And I mean, the whole day I was decorating. First of all, he was right up my behind the whole time.
Helping.
Quotation marks. And he kept saying nuts. Nutcracker, nutcracker, cracking my nuts, nutcracker. I mean, he just would not stop, but it was fun. It was fun. He was he kept saying, I'm just so excited.
Those are great times. Great time.
It is. And it's fun with my grandchildren, too, the rest of them, too, because they are really excited. But anyway, we should probably get on with the interview. This is going on long enough.
Yes, we've talked enough about Christmas decorations. So here is Anthea. Today, we are really excited to have Anthea Sharp with us. How are you?
I am doing great. I'm so happy to be here.
Well, we're thrilled you're here. Well, let Sarah read your bio and then we'll get started.
Anthea Sharp is a USA Today bestselling author of the Fairyland series, where a high-tech game opens a gateway to the realm of the fairy, and the fantasy or romantasy series, The Darkwood Chronicles. She's been successfully indie publishing since 2011. In the last 2 years, she has gotten fired up about Kickstarter, funding over $110K on the platform, starting an active Facebook group, and writing the book Kickstarter for Authors.
Wow, that is amazing.
Yeah, you've been busy.
Yeah.
I have. And, it's funny, 2011, feels like just yesterday in some ways, and forever ago. I mean, it's decades in indie publishing, really. So.
Right. Yeah. Well, tell us, how did you get into writing?
So I always wrote poetry. I was one of those sort of emo high school girls, pouring my heart out on the page. And so I was very comfortable with poems, but fiction, like books, that was something authors wrote,
Yeah.
And those authors were some other kind of breed of person, and it didn't occur to me that I could write a book, even though I loved playing with words and language, until sort of one of those fateful things where you pick up a book you're super excited about and you read it and it just disappoints all your reader expectations. And so that happened to me, and I was just incensed because the book never turned into the book that I was wanting it to be, that I was reading it for. So I threw it against the wall and I uttered those fateful words. I could write a better book than that.
The start of many a writing career, right?
I think so. I think so. And so I dived in, and then I was like, oh, wait, I really don't know how to write fiction. And so I took myself to school for a couple of years, right?
Yeah.
There's so many great craft books out there and workshops. And this was in sort of, back in the better days of RWA, where authors were freely sharing information. There was so much support for newer authors coming up. And so.
Yep. That's where I got my education too. Yep.
Yeah.
That and Writing Romance for Dummies. I actually did read that book.
Well, we like to ask everybody, what is your definition of success?
Waking up every day in a good mood, ready to do the things that I have planned for the day, and I've been self-employed as an author for quite a long time now. And so that just feels like success, just being able to make this my career is great. Right. In the last year or so, as we all know, the landscape has changed a lot in independent publishing, self-publishing, and this is kind of ties into why I'm a huge Kickstarter booster now. But it's gotten harder and harder in a lot of ways. If anyone follows Becca Syme, the blue water in indie publishing is gone. The gold rush is over. So then what? And I found myself in that trap of just running faster and faster on the hamster wheel, trying to keep the momentum going that used to be a lot easier. And so you're just, you become a speed freak, publish faster, write faster, promote faster, throw more and more and more and more and more. And it was making me kind of crazy. And at the same time, my husband was able to take early retirement. And he's like, it would be really nice if we could have some fun together if you weren't working all the time. And so my mantra for the last year was relaxed prosperity. How can I keep this going, but not be quite so amped up about the whole thing? Kickstarter has been a really key part of that, of bringing in, it's not exactly relaxed, but it's definitely a place where authors can kind of revitalize their careers. So
I love that. Relaxed prosperity.
That's relaxed prosperity. That's a great, I'm going to write that down.
Yeah, I've already written it down.
Actually, how do you spell relaxed?
What is that word?
It's something that we're not, we do have been, I think as an industry, we've been in this, we have an opportunity, let's get in there and let's get the books written and get them out. And it does it. You can only do that for so long.
Who knew there were so many hamster wheels in the world? And they're owned by indie authors. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. And that's not just one. Every new thing is like another hamster wheel. And you can't turn yourself into 10 hamsters at once running as fast as you can. So
you can't. You can't. Well, what do you wish you'd known about writing and craft?
I think that I do remember trying to write a couple stories, sort of fanfic-ish kind of things back in middle school, and starting and going great guns and then just kind of losing steam. And I think I had come in with this assumption that if there's a good story, you just write it, you just tell it, and some authors have those gift books, right? Where you just sit down and you write and the whole book, but that it's work, and I wish I'd realized that at a much younger age, that there's some patterns about writing. There's novel structure is a thing that you can study and then learn, and then learn how to write a coherent narrative that stays together and that's not boring.
Right.
So that was one of my misconceptions. And I think part of that, authors are another species kind of thing. These are the people who know how to do that and I don't. And it took way too long to construct that bridge of I don't now, but the resources are out there I could learn.
Right. You can learn that. It can just take a while to figure it all out and figure out what works for you.
Yeah, exactly. And then I was lucky to have some good mentors early on in RWA. And then later on, as I sort of broke out into writing short fiction, learning just to trust your voice, not to assume, so-and-so is doing that, so I have to do that, but just really learning to be authentic to who you are as a writer, which, it's tough and it takes some confidence and some guts. One of my writing mentors has said, our own original voice is boring to us because that's how we sound in our own heads. And so a lot of beginning authors start by thinking, I need to be authorly sounding.
Yeah.
Well, what about marketing? What do you wish you'd known about marketing?
Wow. So I actually started off being traditionally published in romance, actually. And this was right in that transition time. My books came out 2007, 2008 from Kensington Books in New York, romances. And that was just when the shift was happening to digital a little bit. But there was still less control on the author's part. And I didn't have a website. I didn't have a mailing list. And I really wish one of my more savvy friends who was published about the same time set up her mailing list. She sent the sign up in with her back matter, to the publisher. And there it was in her book. And I was like, oh, wow, that was a huge missed opportunity, at my point. So, and that's one of the first things I tell newer authors who are like, oh, I'm working on a book or I'm getting ready to publish. I'm like, set up your website and get a mailing list now. I know it feels like but I have not even published. I don't know what to say, but just lay that groundwork. I think, for all of us being around the block a time or two, we've seen platforms come and go. We've seen like some things do really well, and then all of a sudden, like the bottom falls out, and we don't have access to those readers that were on there. So cultivating, our own way of connecting with our readers is just essential.
Yeah.
Excellent.
And I think too, when you're starting out, for me, there was a lot of imposter syndrome where I didn't feel I could do some of those things until I had a contractor, until I had a publisher. It seemed very presumptuous to set up a website about Sarah Rosette, author.
Right.
And who was I to say I was an author? But I think you have to get over that and go ahead and do it. And it's so much smarter if you do.
And to have that in place before you publish, before success comes along, sort of set yourself up for success. I think that's another thing a lot of authors do, and beginning authors. It's like, you don't think about, well, what happens if this is really successful? Do I have the things in place? We want a little bit of success, but a lot of people are unprepared if there's more than a little bit. Right?
Yeah, exactly. What assumptions did you make at the beginning of your writing career, and looking back, did they turn out to be right or wrong?
Oh my gosh. So coming in, being traditionally published, I mean, you have so many rose-colored glasses, and it depends so much on the publishing house, on the editor, on the imprint that you're purchased with. So I came in, despite being in RWA at the time, and kind of should have known better in some ways, but I had all these rosy assumptions about what traditional publishing would be able to do for me in my career. I was like, I sold on a 2-book contract. This is it. I'm going to New York Times bestseller. Here I come. And basic assumptions like that I will get some competent editing. That didn't really happen. And it was sort of sobering. The first book was in pretty good shape. It was one of those things where you work really hard on your first book, and I put it in a lot of RWA contests, and I've gotten a ton of reader feedback and worked a lot. And my husband and I actually worked on that book together because he was like, oh, how does fiction work? That's interesting. Let's figure this out. But then the second book, since it was a 2-book contract, the second book has to be written and turned in in a much shorter period of time. And that really could have benefited from some structural edits that it didn't get. Luckily, I was able to get the rights reverted and fix those issues and republish both of those books once I got the rights back. So that was good. So that, and particularly if you're bought on a very low advance, as an author, you have zero input. I was presented with my cover. This is your cover. I was presented with the title change. I was presented with, this is the back cover copy, which was kind of cringe. And I was like, what about, because editors are not writers, and sometimes they're marketers and can write good copy, but sometimes not. And no one knows your book as well as you do, right?
Correct.
So I wrote up a few possibilities, and they completely got ignored. And that was hard.
So did you go indie right after that?
Yeah, pretty much. So I had a friend.
Pretty much the springboard to indie self.
Yeah, I was like, you know what? I could do a better job with my books than the publishing house did, and it was. So the third romance, the first romance that I put up self-published, in the first month I made more than the advance on the first 2 books that I had gotten, and that was a huge vindication. It was like, okay, I can do this.
Yeah, you can do it, and your ideas are good.
Yeah, which is hard, because that whole gatekeeper, that immature of success, right? Like, oh, well, you're worthy, whereas when you go indie, you have to pick yourself, and you have to have the confidence that I'm worthy of picking.
What's the most important lesson you've learned?
Wow. To just really be where I am in my writing career. It's so easy to look at people further ahead of you on the path, right? Or who published at the same time, but their sales exploded and yours are just okay. And just to realize, they're on their career trajectory and I'm on mine. And that's that's a good place to be. And then to really embrace it, not to become stagnant, not to be just like, oh, but just realize this is the place I am right now. And I'm going to strive to improve that. But I don't need to look at that person over there and feel bad about myself or my career. I just need to be where I am.
Oh, that's a really good one. That, I mean, because we hear people talk about comparison, and I mean, that is what you're talking about, but it's different because it's more you focused than it is them focused. It's like, okay, this is where I'm at. This is my path and my trajectory, and I'm going to be okay with that. And I like that.
And I think comparison can be really valuable to identify, hey, that person is going the direction I want to be going.
Mm-hmm.
What are they doing in their career that I'm not doing? What kind of, what can I adopt that, use that as a pattern or a template, not to copy other authors, obviously, but to sort of take note of the success stories and see what you can apply to your own path.
Yeah. I love that. What's the biggest change you've had to make in your thinking?
Just really being able to pivot, to be super flexible, right? Because 2011 was 13 years ago now. That's huge changes in the industry, right?
Yeah.
And even before that, of course, being Trad Pub, and then having that confidence to pick myself and to say, okay, I'm going to try this independent publishing thing, and then go indie, and then all of the changes in the publishing ecosystem since that point. So pivoting and noticing what people are doing that's working. I think part of the hamster wheeling is everyone saying, oh, do this, this will increase your sales. Oh, here, there's this new serialization platform. You should get on that, but you should also do this, but you should do that. I tried a lot of things, and some of them worked, and some of them worked for a hot second and then stopped, and so just pivoting, but learning to recognize what is being successful, like really recognize it and cut the other things loose. So part of the relaxed prosperity was I have a list called the pruning list, and I got a gold star whenever I cut something out of my business. So, or when there's an opportunity I choose not to take. So that's an atta girl for not following every single path that's out there, but really, what does Becca Syme call it? JOMO. Joy of missing out.
Yeah, that's very smart because you're giving yourself a reward. A lot of times when we say no to something or stop doing something, we feel bad, but you're giving yourself a reward, saying that's a good thing. And a lot of times we do have to cut things out, and it's hard.
Yeah, it is. It really is. And that's helped a lot. So a year ago, when I was sort of forecasting for my next business year, and I'm like, I'm working so hard, I'm stressed out, like, what can I do? And part of it too was realizing I cut out the things that weren't serving my core purpose, my core mission statement. I was helping run a multi-author fantasy mailing list. I do a lot of multi-author anthology projects with other authors. And I was, these are great. These are fun things, but they're really not serving my core purpose, and the efficacy has sort of fallen off, so in early days, group author projects and big anthologies, shared world anthologies and stuff, they were great. They really helped move the needle for all the authors. And then over time, the landscape changed, and those weren't as effective.
That's so smart. That is so smart. And I think I certainly need to do more of that. So that's a good goal for me for the next year. We always like to ask, if you were starting over today, what would you do differently? So maybe, I don't know if you would do traditional publishing, but is there advice that you would give somebody who's starting out now?
Definitely educate yourself as best you can, and realize, it's funny because often people who are new or say, should I choose traditional or indie? It's like, well, you can't really choose to be traditionally published. You certainly can't choose to be traditionally published with a 6-figure advance, right? Like, that's, you don't wake up and say, I decide I'm going to go get a 6-figure advance. So just educating yourself, being clear about your aims, realize that it's going to be work no matter what.
Right.
Yeah. And that's the thing that I think a lot of romance authors really found it easier to jump the fence from traditional into self-publishing because particularly romance authors were doing a lot of the heavy lifting to begin with on careers in terms of mailing list, websites, marketing, blog tours. It's like, well, wait a minute. If we're doing all of this and the traditional publishers are not doing much of anything, then why not make 70% royalties on our ebooks? Why am I getting 8% or 25% of net? And net is a slippery thing, right?
Yeah.
So.
She made air quotes when she said 25% of net.
Do your homework, figure out what's going to serve your interest. If you really want to get out there and reach readers and be published, or to have a book out there and find your readers, then self-publish. If some people say, well, I'm going to try both. Okay, you could get that manuscript out on the query go round where you're trying to find an agent for a year. And then the agent will shop it around for another year, maybe to TradPub, and maybe it'll get picked up for a $5,000 advance and come out in 2 years. So now you're 4 years out from today. So, kind of realize. Yeah. And I think for people who are starting out right now is to learn to recognize what success really is. That's one thing I kind of regret, right? Looking back, is I had a couple of places where I had success and I didn't realize it because, again, I was doing the comparisonitis.
Yeah. Yep.
And, if only, if I'd known then that I'm writing one short story and having that be in the top 300 of Amazon for 3 months was actually quite successful, and I should have doubled down on that.
Exactly. But that's hard too, because you just don't know what you don't know, and I had the same sort of things right at the beginning. Well, let's switch a little bit and talk about what you wish you'd known about Kickstarter. When did you do your first Kickstarter?
So I did my first Kickstarter in March of 2022. And the one thing I wish I'd known or done about Kickstarter was that several of my writer friends and acquaintances had been using Kickstarter for several years beforehand and said, hey, look, Kickstarter. And I was just like, I thought it was GoFundMe, right? I thought, I'm going to go out with my hat in my hand, but for donations, please support. And that very, very much turned me off of the whole idea of crowdfunding. And so I was like, Or, Kickstarter is fine for you guys. Chris Rush and Dean Wesley Smith, you have a big following. You've been working on Kickstarter for a long time. You have a lot of authors who follow you. That's fine for you. It wouldn't work for me, though.
Right.
So again, building walls where I didn't necessarily have to. So in fall of 2021, an acquaintance or a friend of mine did a Kickstarter for their mystery series, just a little cute, small mystery. And they don't have an enormous following. They're not like Sarah Rosette or someone. And, and their Kickstarter did really well. It funded at like $7,000. And I was like, wow. Wait a minute. And I checked it out and I looked at it and I was like, this is just a pre-order. This is just get the book early. And you also get these little goodies, and people are celebrating like these milestones along the way as you fund, and it's kind of a party. And this is great. Why didn't I do this earlier? Yeah. So I started studying the platform very intensively in like fall 2021, and my 2022 beginning of the year list had in big letters, figure out Kickstarter. So I took actually a backlist series and decided to make an omnibus. It was 3 kind of shorter romantic fantasies. And this was my Into the Darkwood trilogy. And so I started setting it up, and I'm like, I'm going to launch in March. And I did. And I was very fortunate because March 2022 was the month that Brandon Sanderson had his enormous campaign.
Oh, wow.
That funded $42 million on Kickstarter.
You did as well, right?
I did not pay $42 million. But I wanted to hit that $7,000 mark that
Yeah.
I had, and I was
Sure.
and I did, and I was super psyched. This was backlist series that I did, a hardcover edition that was not blingy, fancy special edition. It was just a hardcover that I printed at Ingram,
Yeah.
and I was sold. From then on, I just loved it. I love the platform. I love the ability to interact with backers, and coming from the retailers to
Right.
Kickstarter, they give you so much information, so much transparency around what's happening with your campaign, who's interacting with it, where they're interacting, where the pledges are coming, like all of that. And so I love that. I was hooked, and I've been running 3 to 4 Kickstarters a year.
Wow. That's
Yeah,
a lot.
that was going to be my next question is how many have you done so far? It sounds like quite a few.
Yeah, I have. I've run 10 on Kickstarter. I just recently ran one on BackerKit. So BackerKit they're a post-campaign pledge manager is how they started, but they've been sort of dipping their toe into also just being a crowdfunding platform. And Brandon Sanderson, they got him over there to do a campaign that funded, only I think 26 or 28 million.
Still pretty good.
Yeah. It's much smaller. BackerKit's much smaller than Kickstarter, and it's not as user friendly. I think that was an interesting experiment to do a campaign on BackerKit, and I'll probably keep my toe in there a little bit. But Kickstarter is it's such a good platform. And they're constantly improving it. They're making changes all the time, which is great, but also annoying for me because I wrote a book called Kickstarter for Authors, and now half of it's out of date. So the second edition will be coming out next year.
Oh, there you go. Well, how do you integrate Kickstarter then into your release schedule?
So Kickstarter is great if you have backlists, particularly because one of the things you can do, so Kickstarter, you have to bring a new project to life.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean you have to launch your book on Kickstarter. It just means you have to, and Sarah, I mean, you've got Kickstarter experience too, so and so like hardcover omnibus of books that haven't been out in hardcover or don't have an omnibus, and then a lot of authors are using it to make those super blingy special editions. A Kickstarter is great for that because a lot of those special editions you have to get a print run. And in order to do a print run, you have to order a minimum quantity and pay for that. And so if you're, on the hook for $5,000, most authors don't have necessarily spare $5,000 hanging around. But knowing that you can raise that funding on Kickstarter and that you have people who want to buy the books, and they have bought the books, they pre-ordered them.
Do you use it more for backlist, promoting your backlist, and not as much for a new release?
I have done one new release, and my strategy now going forward is every new release is going to start on Kickstarter. So first place it goes is Kickstarter. And then, after the Kickstarter ends, it goes up for pre-order on my direct store. And then down the line, the retailers will get it. So retailers have really shifted to third place in my entire business strategy. So it's, and this definitely for authors who are in Kindle Unlimited, it's great to start on Kickstarter because then you can offer the ebook as well. You're not locked into not being able to offer it, because if you're on Kindle Unlimited, you cannot put your ebook in your Kickstarter. That's against terms of service.
One of the things people ask me is, did I find new readers on Kickstarter? So have you found new readers, or do you feel like it's your readers that you're pulling in?
Absolutely. You can find new readers on Kickstarter. And that was the thing that just kind of gobsmacked me with my first campaign based on the Kickstarter metrics. And I know this was absolutely accurate because I did not have a pre-launch period for my first campaign. I was planning to launch it later in March, but then Brandon Sanderson launched March 1st. And I was like, oh my gosh, there were some coattails there that I need to get on right away. And so I went straight from approval to launching my campaign. So I didn't have any sort of spreading the word, gathering pre-launch followers, any of that that would have diluted my metrics that Kickstarter was telling me. And so 80% of the people who supported my campaign came from the Kickstarter platform.
Wow.
So yes, I think I had 160 backers. And that's the other thing. You don't need an enormous number of backers on Kickstarter to have a successful campaign. You can have 50 backers and still make, still find at least a couple $1,000s, just depending on what you're offering, which is the reverse of what we're so trained for on the retailers, right? Which
Correct.
Small dollar, and you've got to find a ton of people. Kickstarter is the reverse, right? You can have a higher dollar amount. You can have an average pledge amount of $25, $50, $100, depending on what you're offering. And then if you get 50, 100 people to support you, you're great.
What do you see working on Kickstarter now? And what do you see not working?
Anything fantasy adjacent or fantasy is going to do really well. A lot of the early adopters of Kickstarter, Michael J. Sullivan is a great example. He's been doing Kickstarters since, I think before the 2010s even. He was,
oh, wow.
And really getting a very solid base there. The Zangaris, Robert and his dad, have done Kickstarters. They do one Kickstarter a year for their big fantasy release, and they've done this for 8 or 9 years, probably at least. So the fantasy readers are used to coming to Kickstarter and getting their fantasy books. And then Brandon Sanderson, obviously. So anything with some fantasy elements is going to do really well. Ironically, like straight up contemporary romance does not do great on Kickstarter. It's good to have something a little maybe nerdy, geeky, different, edgy. Kickstarter backers are there because they want to support creators. They don't want to be on the mainstream retailers. Yeah. I think Kickstarter backers, self-included, like to think of themselves as like, we're a little different. We're not supporting what everyone else is doing,
I think too, granted, only, 20% of your backing comes from your current readers, but, so many contemporary romance readers are KU readers. They're not really built and made to buy books. That's just nothing against them. That's just not their reading model.
That's not what they're interested in.
No, it's not. Yeah. And so, but that is super interesting. What about bundles or, I don't know, any certain content not
format,
working?
Maybe.
Definitely. And I have to say there are some contemporary authors, although they tend to be bringing in their paranormal or they're super spicy or they're dark kind of. And there are authors with huge rabid fan bases. And some of those people are totally willing to come over and pledge $200 for the fancy special edition set, their favorite author. And so a lot of the romance and romantasy is jumping aboard the shelf trophy trend that's going on right now.
Yeah.
Which I totally credit Red Tower Books for starting with Fourth Wing and making that simply. And the book boxes, of course, Fairy Loot and all Fake Rate, all of those book boxes have kind of trained people to buy beautiful editions of books at an actual pretty high price point. And so there are book collectors out there who love that. And so Kickstarter is perfect for that. If you want to go super special, fancy color interior, printed edge design, raised foiling on the cover, like all of that. So those tend to do pretty well. And a lot of attention gets put on those when people look at Kickstarter. But I think it's also really important to emphasize that you don't have to do that, right? You can bring out your debut book in ebook, paperback, and just basic hardcover and do just fine on Kickstarter and defray a lot of your expenses and launch on the retailers when you get there. You can launch in the black. You can have already made back your editing costs, your cover costs, all of that. So it's
awesome.
Well, just out of curiosity, can you estimate how long it takes you to plan and run and fulfill a Kickstarter? Because it's not like launching a book on the retailers.
And I do think that's a
yeah.
deterrent for some people. My hand is in the air, Yeah.
Definitely. It's longer than you think is the answer.
Yes.
And I'm a huge Kickstarter booster. So one of the things I've learned though over the years, and particularly, doing the strengths, Becca Syme, the Clifton strengths, is that I high positivity. You might have guessed that. So high positivity. So I'm one of those like everybody should try this, and it's taken me a while to learn. Like, okay, maybe your strengths are not a good fit for Kickstarter.
Yeah.
It's just there. It takes a specific skill set. That said, I really encourage everyone to try it,
Right.
just to see.
Yeah, because you never know.
Exactly, and maybe you do love it, and maybe it works well for you. But I would say give yourself probably 6 months it's going to take from start to end of your Kickstarter. And that's with all the steps. So you start building out your campaign, and then you want your campaign to be in pre-launch so that you can start getting backers or followers on the platform. So pre-launch is sort of like a pre-order page, or like coming soon.
Yeah.
Before you're live. And then everyone who follows that pre-launch page, when you hit the live button, they get a notification. So more and more, I'm a fan of telling people to have at least a long enough pre-launch so that you get 25 followers, kind of bare minimum. And you can, people will find you organically on the platform.
Right.
You'll also try and worm your mailing list up to the idea of what Kickstarter is, not GoFundMe. Hello. Note to self. And on your socials. And as more and more authors are using Kickstarter, more and more readers are understanding how the platform works, right? And there's the barrier to entry is starting to go down just a little bit. So you're going to set it up, and it takes, probably 40 hours to set up a really good campaign. Even a non-complicated campaign, there's lots of moving parts to Kickstarter. And then you're going to want your pre-launch probably minimum 2 weeks. And some people are pre-launching for months now at a time, just to try and get enough pre-launch followers so that when they hit that live button, email goes out to 150 people, and then you fund immediately.
Yeah. Okay. Great.
And and then the Kickstarter itself, you can run Kickstarter for 60 days on the platform. That's way too long. You pretty much 3 weeks is the sweet spot that you want to.
Okay.
Some people find that a little longer does better for them. A lot of people find a little shorter. There's some people who say, I did 3 weeks, and boy, I'm never going to go over 17 days now. Like that almost killed me. It's very intense. People don't realize that, while your Kickstarter is live, it kind of sucks all the oxygen from the room.
I agree. So much so.
Well, real quick, let's switch gears just a minute to talk about writing fantasy or romantasy. What advice would you give authors writing in this genre?
Know your genre, right?
Yeah.
Know the expectations, know the story beats, know the tropes, know what a happily ever after really is. It's not that one of them dies at the end, Nicholas Sparks. So,
poor Nicholas Sparks.
And then just really embrace, have fun, make an awesome fantasy world that people want to inhabit. And make that romantasy is interesting because it needs to be really solidly romance, but also really a well-envisioned, well-working fantasy world too. Yeah. So in some ways, it's even more complicated. I don't know, because you have to you have even more reader expectations you have to hit.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, this has been so interesting, and I think really helpful. I think our listeners will find lots of good information in this. What's the best thing you've done to set yourself up for success?
So I think there's a couple of things that authors who have just been in the game for a long period of time bring to the table in terms of success-wise. And that is that after you've been doing this a few years, you get a backlist. get connections. Your mailing list grows. So I think for newer people, my advice would be patient and just know that the build is going to happen and stay in there. For me personally, I think, again, just letting go of those expectations and but also trying to find some discipline around my writing, my promoting, my, keeping my head in the game every day in some way or another. But definitely just really working to nurture readers, to remember that what we're doing, we're writing books, and yes, it's a product, and we talk about marketing and we talk about running Kickstarters, but really it's about connecting with your readers, finding those people that love what you're writing and want more of it, and to nurture that.
Yes. Good answer. Well, tell everyone where they can find out more about you and your books and
your
all the
Kickstarter
stuff
book?
and your Kickstarter book and all the stuff.
Absolutely. So number one thing, and it's just a funny side story. So I did my Kickstarter back in 2022, and it did really well. I was so excited. And I said, I can hardly wait to go on Facebook, which, as we know, is where a lot of author business happens, a lot of author groups. I said, I can hardly wait to go on Facebook and find those Kickstarter groups for authors that are out there so we can all talk about this and share strategies. And there was one, and it was paywalled. And I was like, well, I don't want to paywalled group. So I started the group Kickstarter for Authors, and I really recommend anyone, any author at all, who's at all curious about Kickstarter, how it might work in their own business model, to join that group on Facebook, Kickstarter for Authors. It's just chock full of amazing information. Everything from how do I set up my first Kickstarter to which Chinese printer are you working with to get the white ink on black paper special editions, so a whole gamut. And you can find my book, Kickstarter for Authors, is out on all the retail platforms. I did mention I'm working on a second edition. And so right now, the ebook, my direct store is discounted to $2.99, and you can go to fiddleheadpress.com and find the ebook there for $3. And I'll be dropping the price on that around the beginning of the year, probably in preparation for the second edition to come out. The principles in that book are still absolutely sound in terms of how you set up a Kickstarter, but there's a section of the book that walks you through the Kickstarter site step by step, and they've changed things like I talk about, go to this big button on the left. Well, that button's on the right now. Things like And so all of my books can be found at fiddleheadpress.com. And I also have an author website, antheasharp.com. And one day that and my Shopify site will be the same, but that hasn't quite happened yet. Definitely, I encourage any author who has questions about Kickstarter in particular, or about anything we chatted about, drop me a line, Anthea at antheasharp.com, or come find me on Facebook. I hang out there a lot because I'm managing a group that has almost 7,000 members now.
Oh, wow. That's amazing.
And it is a great group. I've been in there. I found valuable information, so highly recommend it. So we will have links to all those notes in the show notes, and you can find those at wishidknownforwriters.com. And if you want to support the podcast, you can go to that same link /support. So thanks for being here today. It was really enjoyed talking to you.
No, I loved it. Thank you guys so much, Sarah and Jamie.
Welcome.
Great.
All right, we'll see everybody next week.
Bye.
Bye.